under crystal chandeliers that cast diamond patterns across the marble floor. 16-year-old Seraphina Sterling crumpled like paper, her blue silk gown pooling around her, as her lips turned the color of winter sky. The orchestra's final note hung frozen in the air, while 500 guests turned to stone, their champagne flutes suspended halfway to their lips. William Sterling's voice shattered the silence, raw and desperate, calling for a doctor who wasn't there. That's when 12-year-old Elias Carter dropped his father's toolbox with a metallic crash that echoed through the ballroom. 3 seconds, 3 choices. Tilt her head to open the airway, clear the obstruction with practiced fingers, begin compressions with the precise rhythm he'd memorized from library textbooks. He grabbed a cocktail straw, improvised a makeshift valve. Her pulse fluttered back like a butterfly finding wind. Eyelids trembled open. The ballroom exhaled collectively, then erupted in chaos as phones rose like salutes and security guards rushed forward. William Sterling met the thin boy's steady gaze and felt something fundamental break inside him. Pride, certainty, the walls he'd built around his heart, while a vow formed in that instant to repay what could never truly be repaid. The Sterling Hall Hotel stood like a glass monument against Manhattan's skyline, its grand ballroom transformed for the most anticipated tech launch of the year. Sterling Global's new medical AI system promised to revolutionize emergency response times, and William Sterling had orchestrated every detail with military precision. He checked his platinum watch for the 7th time in 10 minutes. A habit that betrayed the control he fought to maintain over a world that refused to be controlled. His daughter Seraphina stood near the stage, unconsciously pressing her palm against her chest, where her heart beat its irregular rhythm, a secret known only to her father, her doctor Adelaide Moore, and the bodyguard Clinton Rhodes, who shadowed her steps. She drew a deep breath before ascending the platform, determined to prove she was more than the fragile princess the board members whispered about in their closed-door meetings. In the service corridor behind the kitchen, George Carter guided his son Elias through the maze of prep stations and storage rooms, their matching work shirts bearing the small logo of Carter Maintenance Services. George had built his business on quiet dignity and flawless work, teaching his son that invisible people saw everything worth seeing. Elias carried the old toolbox his grandfather had passed down, its weight familiar in his small hands. While his mind cataloged details, others missed the way the smoke machine beneath the stage vibrated irregularly, the pattern of electrical loads that suggested the building's grid was stressed, the nervous energy crackling through the service staff who'd been working 18-hour shifts to prepare for tonight. They'd been called to help Finn Bellamy, the hotel's young event engineer, whose walk-in freezer had developed a critical malfunction 3 hours before the ceremony. Finn's usual confidence had crumbled into barely controlled panic, as hundreds of thousands of dollars in catered food threatened to spoil. George diagnosed the problem in minutes, a cascade failure in the control board triggered by the building's overtaxed electrical system. While his father worked, Elias noticed how the power fluctuations matched the rhythm of the stage lighting tests. Filing the observation away in the vast library of patterns, his mind constantly assembled. "You saved my entire career," Finn breathed when the freezer hummed back to life, his relief so profound he nearly hugged George before catching himself. "I won't forget this. Ever. If you need anything, and I mean anything, you find me." George simply nodded, uncomfortable with excessive gratitude. While Elias studied the way relief transformed Finn's posture, how crisis and resolution rewired human behavior in predictable patterns. They gathered their tools to leave, but William Sterling's head of communications, Vivian Price, intercepted them with her practiced smile that never reached her calculating eyes. "You'll stay through the event," she informed, rather than asked. "We might need additional support." The words carried the weight of command from someone used to arranging human chess pieces, and George recognized they had no real choice. The ballroom filled with pharmaceutical executives, venture capitalists, and medical technology pioneers, their conversations weaving a tapestry of ambition, and carefully managed expectations. William moved through the crowd with surgical precision, each handshake and greeting calibrated to maintain the delicate ecosystem of influence and investment. Oliver Grant, Sterling Global's chief financial officer, shadowed him with quarterly reports and risk assessments, his caution a perpetual counterweight to William's bold vision. The company's legal counsel, Serena Hale, observed from the periphery, her sharp mind already anticipating the legal implications of every promise made tonight. Seraphina took her position at the podium as the lights dimmed to spotlight intensity. She'd insisted on presenting the beta test results herself, defying the board members who thought the chief executive's daughter should remain decorative rather than functional. Her voice rang clear and confident as she outlined the AI system's ability to reduce emergency response times by 43%, her passion for the technology genuine, despite the tremor only she could feel in her chest. The smoke machine beneath the stage coughed its theatrical fog while the lighting system cycled through its programmed sequence, and for a moment everything aligned perfectly: the vision, the atmosphere, the promise of lives saved through innovation. Then the light stuttered in a pattern Elias recognized from the freezer malfunction, a sharp strobe that lasted less than 2 seconds, but triggered something catastrophic in Seraphina's carefully managed condition. Her rare cardiac arrhythmia, specifically triggered by certain light frequencies combined with acoustic resonance, seized her heart in a grip that stopped time itself. She swayed like a reed in wind, her hand reaching for the podium that suddenly seemed miles away before collapsing with a grace that made the horror almost beautiful. The microphone captured her final exhale, amplifying it through speakers that turned 500 successful people into panicked children. William vaulted from his front row seat, his composed executive facade shattering as he screamed for Dr. Moore, who was trapped in an elevator that had frozen between floors when the building's electrical system hiccuped. The crowd pressed forward with helpful uselessness, their collective medical knowledge worthless without the right person to apply it. Phones emerged to capture tragedy for social media consumption, while security guards tried to establish a perimeter that kept dissolving under the weight of morbid curiosity. In this chaos of wealth and power reduced to primitive fear, Elias moved with the clarity that comes from seeing patterns where others see only noise. He crossed the ballroom in 7 strides, his young voice cutting through the panic with unexpected authority. "Finn, clear a workspace. Mr. Rhodes, move these people back now." Neither man questioned the 12-year-old who spoke with such certainty. Crisis had a way of revealing true hierarchy. Elias knelt beside Seraphina, his hands steady as his mind ran through the checklist he'd memorized from emergency medicine textbooks he'd devoured in the public library. Her lips carried the cyanotic blue of oxygen deprivation, her chest barely moving, pulse thready and fading. No time for hesitation, no room for the doubt that would have paralyzed someone who understood the magnitude of what could go wrong. The head tilt came first, precise and careful, opening the airway with the exact angle he'd practiced on demonstration mannequins during free community health fairs. His fingers swept her mouth, clearing the tongue that had rolled back in unconscious surrender. The cocktail straw materialized from a nearby table, and in a moment of innovation born from necessity, he fashioned a crude but functional valve to regulate airflow. Compressions began with the mechanical precision of someone who'd counted out the rhythm 1,000 times in his mind. 30 compressions, 2 breaths, the mathematics of resurrection playing out through his small hands. Time stretched and compressed simultaneously. To the watching crowd, it felt like hours of helpless observation. To Elias, each second divided into milliseconds of decision and action. The force needed to compress an adult chest without causing damage, the angle that would maximize blood flow, the careful monitoring of her carotid pulse between compressions. His child's body contained the knowledge of someone triple his age, applied with the fearlessness that came from seeing only the problem and its solution, not the consequences of failure. The first flutter of response came like spring's first warmth after endless winter, A pulse, weak but genuine, thrummed beneath his fingers. Her chest rose with autonomous breath, shallow but independent. Color crept back into her lips like dawn breaking over water. When her eyelids trembled and opened, revealing confused but conscious eyes, the ballroom's collective exhale could have powered windmills. Elias sat back on his heels, suddenly aware of 500 people staring at him, their expressions ranging from awe to disbelief, to the calculating look of those already spinning narratives for their own purposes. William Sterling dropped to his knees beside his daughter, his manicured hands trembling as they touched her face with infinite gentleness. The transformation in his expression as he looked at Elias transcended gratitude. It was the recognition of one soul by another, the shattering of every assumption about worth and value and power. "What's your name?" he asked, his voice raw with emotions he'd spent decades learning to suppress. "Elias Carter, sir. My dad and I were fixing the freezer." The simple statement carried no awareness of its own profundity, no understanding that this moment would ripple outward in waves that would reshape multiple lives. Dr. Adelaide Moore arrived minutes later, having descended 11 floors by maintenance ladder when the elevator failed. Her professional assessment confirmed what everyone had witnessed. Elias's intervention had purchased the golden minutes that separated recovery from tragedy. She stabilized Seraphina with practiced efficiency while quietly marveling at the precision of the boy's improvised treatment. "Medical training?" she asked Elias, who shook his head. "Library books and online videos," he admitted, unaware that this confession would later become part of the legend. Adelaide's subsequent report would note that while the boy's actions didn't replace professional medical intervention, his timing and decision-making showed an intuitive understanding that many trained professionals took years to develop. The aftermath unfolded in waves of escalating complexity. Vivian Price immediately recognized both the opportunity and the danger the situation presented, her mind already crafting narratives that would control the story before it controlled them. "We need to manage this carefully," she told William in the private alcove where they'd retreated while Seraphina was transported to the hospital. "A child performing emergency medicine at our event, the liability implications alone could destroy us." Oliver Grant agreed, his risk-averse nature seeing lawsuits and regulatory scrutiny in every angle. "We should minimize the boy's involvement, perhaps even suggest that security assisted while waiting for medical help." But William had been fundamentally changed in those 3 seconds when his daughter lay dying. The executive who would have prioritized corporate protection above all else had been replaced by a father who understood that some debts transcended business logic. "We tell the truth," he said with quiet finality. "The complete truth. That boy saved Seraphina when all our money and power meant nothing." The decision would prove more complex than his moral clarity suggested, as truth in the age of social media had a way of mutating beyond recognition. Within hours, the first videos hit the internet with titles ranging from "Genius Kid Saves Billionaire's Daughter" to "Staged Medical Emergency at Tech Launch." The algorithm-driven engagement machines transformed Elias from a clever 12-year-old into either a superhuman prodigy or a carefully coached actor, depending on which narrative generated more clicks. Anonymous bloggers suggested the entire event had been orchestrated to distract from Sterling Global's disappointing quarterly earnings, while others claimed Elias was a plant, a child actor hired to create viral marketing for the medical AI system. George Carter watched his son's face appear on screens throughout the city with mounting dread. He'd spent years building a life of careful invisibility, understanding that in America, being useful but unseen was the safest path for those without power. Now his brilliant boy was thrust into a spotlight that could either elevate or incinerate him. When William Sterling's security team arrived at their modest apartment in Queens, George's first instinct was to refuse entry, to protect Elias from whatever obligations the wealthy might impose. But Elias, with the same calm certainty he'd shown in the ballroom, said, "We should hear what they have to say, Dad. Running from this won't make it disappear." The meeting at Sterling Manor took place in William's private study, rather than the formal conference room, a deliberate choice to emphasize the personal over the corporate. Constance Brooks, the Sterling family's longtime house manager, served tea with the understated warmth that made the 30,000-square-foot mansion feel momentarily intimate. William spoke not as a chief executive, but as a father. His words, carefully chosen, but genuinely felt. "I owe your son a debt I can never fully repay, but I want to try, not with money thrown at the problem, but with something meaningful." The offer was comprehensive, yet thoughtful. Full academic sponsorship through any educational path Elias chose. Access to Sterling Global's research facilities and mentorship programs. And most remarkably, an invitation for Elias to join Seraphina's newly formed youth council on rare disease research. "Your son sees patterns others miss," William explained. "That gift could help thousands of children with conditions like Seraphina's." George's skepticism showed in every line of his body. "My son needs a childhood, not a corporate sponsorship. I've seen what your world does to people." The protective father faced the grateful one across a divide that money couldn't bridge. Elias spoke for the first time since they'd arrived. "I want to build things that help people. Devices that work when expensive equipment isn't available. Like the straw-simple tools that make the difference when it matters." His words carried neither ambition nor false modesty, just the clear statement of purpose that would define his path. William's eyes lit with recognition. "Then we'll create something bigger than personal sponsorship. A foundation, perhaps. Something that turns your vision into reality." The seed of an impossible idea began to germinate. The backlash came swift and predictable. Social media investigators discovered that Elias had previously been rejected for multiple academic scholarships, spinning this into evidence of the convenient miracle. A coordinated campaign of doubt began trending, suggesting the Sterlings had manufactured the entire crisis to rehabilitate their image after a failed product launch. More viciously, some claimed George had coached his son to create situations where his intervention would be needed, a form of elaborate con artistry targeting the wealthy. The pressure manifested in concrete ways. George lost 2 maintenance contracts from clients who didn't want association with controversy. Elias faced mockery from classmates who called him Dr. Fake and accused him of practicing on homeless people. The public library where he studied became a destination for curiosity seekers and journalists, disrupting the quiet sanctuary where he'd learned everything that saved Seraphina's life. The weight of unwanted attention pressed down like atmosphere on a diving bell, threatening to crush the very qualities that made Elias exceptional. Bridget Quinn, an independent journalist known for her thorough investigation and ethical standards, began digging into the story with characteristic skepticism. She'd built her reputation on exposing manufactured narratives and corporate manipulation, approaching the Sterling incident prepared to uncover another rich family's elaborate deception. But her investigation revealed something unexpected. Security footage from multiple angles showing Elias's genuine, unrehearsed response. Library records documenting years of self-directed medical study. Testimonials from community center volunteers who'd watched him assist during free health screenings. Her article, published in a respected medical journal rather than a sensational news site, presented Elias not as a superhuman prodigy, but as a highly intelligent child who'd applied knowledge with unusual clarity under pressure. She emphasized that his actions, while remarkable, shouldn't encourage untrained individuals to attempt emergency medicine, but also shouldn't diminish the genuine quick thinking that had made the difference. The piece began shifting public perception from extremes toward a more nuanced understanding. Seraphina, recovering at home but following the coverage obsessively, sent Elias a private message through Finn, who'd become an unexpected ally. "Don't let them define you, not the critics or the supporters. You know who you are." The simple words carried weight because they came from someone who understood the burden of public scrutiny, the way it could warp identity until you became the reflection rather than the source. Their brief exchange marked the beginning of a friendship built on shared experience, rather than gratitude or obligation. William made the decision to hold a formal press conference, against Vivian's advice, to let the story fade naturally. Silence feeds speculation, he argued. Though his real motivation was deeper, he needed to publicly acknowledge what private gratitude couldn't fully express. The event was structured to be transparent, but controlled. Adelaide Moore presented the medical facts with clinical precision, carefully explaining that while Elias's intervention was crucial, it represented emergency first aid rather than medical treatment, an important distinction for legal and ethical clarity. William's statement was brief but powerful. In a room full of successful adults, a 12-year-old boy had the clarity and courage to act when my daughter's life hung in the balance. We can debate circumstances and question motives endlessly, but the fact remains. Elias Carter did the right thing at the right moment, and my daughter is alive because of it. He paused, his composure cracking slightly. As a father, not as a chief executive, I will ensure this young man has every opportunity to develop his remarkable gifts. The announcement of the Seraphina Elias Foundation stunned even seasoned financial journalists. $1,000 billion, not million. Billion allocated to a perpetual endowment focused on rare disease research, emergency medical device development for underserved communities, and comprehensive education access for gifted children from low-income families. The structure was revolutionary. Complete transparency with real-time public access to all expenditures, governance by an independent board of medical ethicists and educators, rather than sterling global executives, and, most remarkably, a legal framework that prevented the foundation from ever being used for tax benefits or corporate public relations. Oliver Grant nearly collapsed when William presented the financial structure. You're committing more than the company's entire market capitalization to a foundation you won't even control. William's response was simple. I'm converting gratitude into action on a scale that matches what was given. Serena Hale spent sleepless weeks crafting legal documents that would protect the foundation's mission from future corruption or manipulation, creating what colleagues would later call the most bulletproof charitable structure ever designed. The foundation wasn't presented as a gift to Elias that would have been both inappropriate and overwhelming for a 12-year-old. Instead, it was positioned as Elias's vision made manifest. An institution dedicated to ensuring that simple, affordable medical innovations reached communities where million-dollar machines would never arrive. Elias would serve as a youth advisor, his role growing with his age and expertise. But the foundation would operate independently, its success not dependent on any individual. The scope of the commitment triggered investigations from multiple angles. Financial regulators examined the structure for hidden tax schemes. Medical ethicists debated the implications of such massive private funding for public health initiatives. Political commentators questioned whether one family should wield such influence over medical research priorities. The scrutiny was intense and necessary, ultimately validating the foundation's structure as legally sound and ethically constructed, if philosophically debatable. A twist emerged when Adelaide Moore's deeper investigation into Seraphina's collapse revealed the specific trigger, a rare genetic variant that caused cardiac arrhythmia when exposed to specific combinations of strobe lighting and low-frequency sound waves, exactly the combination produced by the malfunctioning stage effects. The discovery led to identification of 17 other individuals with the same variant, potentially saving lives through awareness and prevention. The revelation transformed the narrative from a single dramatic rescue to the beginning of a medical breakthrough. Simultaneously, Clinton Rhodes and Bridget Quinn's parallel investigations uncovered the source of the malicious rumors. Amanda Brooks, a public relations specialist hired by a hedge fund that had shorted Sterling Global stock, betting on the company's failure. Her sophisticated disinformation campaign had been designed to transform a potential public relations victory into a credibility disaster, protecting her clients' financial positions. The exposure of this manipulation shifted public sympathy decisively toward Elias and the Sterling family, though the damage to their privacy could never be fully undone. The Foundation's official launch took place 6 months after the ballroom incident, in the same Sterling Hall where everything had begun. This time, the event was radically different, open to the public via lottery system, live-streamed with full transparency, and featuring demonstrations of the first prototypes from Elias's emergency kit project. Simple, affordable devices that could be mass-produced for distribution to schools, community centers, and rural clinics. During the ceremony, a photographer's flash array malfunctioned, creating the exact strobe pattern that had triggered Seraphina's original collapse. She felt the familiar flutter in her chest, the warning of potential crisis. But Elias, now familiar with her condition, immediately recognized the danger. Without drama or panic, he simply reached over and switched off the photographer's equipment while quietly alerting Adelaide. The incident lasted seconds, unnoticed by most attendees, but William saw it all: the continued vigilance, the quiet competence, the way his daughter's life remained in the hands of this remarkable young man who asked for nothing in return. A reporter challenged William directly, "Are you buying absolution for your daughter's life?" William's response would become part of business school case studies for decades. "You cannot purchase life or death. They exist beyond transaction. What we're doing is taking the gratitude for one life saved and converting it into infrastructure that might save thousands more. If that's buying something, then I'm grateful to be in a position to pay." The first year of the Foundation's operation exceeded every projection. The emergency kit project produced 7 devices that could be manufactured for under $50 each, but could make critical differences in emergency situations. The Rare Disease Research Fund identified 43 conditions similar to Seraphina's, all triggered by environmental factors that could be avoided once understood. The Education Initiative provided full scholarships to 300 students who showed similar patterns of self-directed learning to Elias's profile. George Carter found his maintenance business transformed in unexpected ways. Sterling Global contracted him to manage all their facilities' emergency preparedness systems, recognizing that his methodical attention to detail and ability to spot potential failures made him invaluable. The steady income and respect allowed him to finally relax the hypervigilance that had defined his parenting, trusting that Elias could navigate his expanding world without losing himself to it. Seraphina started a video blog about living with rare diseases, deliberately unglamorous and practical, discussing everything from the social awkwardness of wearing heart monitors to the psychological impact of knowing your body could betray you without warning. Her partnership with Elias evolved from gratitude to genuine collaboration, their joint presentations to medical schools becoming legendary for their unique perspective on emergency response, the patient and the responder, both children, teaching rooms full of future doctors. The criticism never fully disappeared. Some accused William of philanthropic extremism, converting guilt into tax-deductible grandstanding. Others suggested Elias was being exploited, his childhood sacrificed to become a symbol for other people's agendas. These critiques contained enough truth to sting, but not enough to stop the Foundation's momentum. The work continued, grounded in the simple premise that had started everything. When someone needs help, you help them, using whatever tools and knowledge you have available. 2 years into the Foundation's operation, Elias received a package from an unknown sender. Inside was a stethoscope that had belonged to Jonas Salk, who had refused to patent the polio vaccine, believing health innovations belonged to humanity. The accompanying note read, "From one who understood that saving lives shouldn't come with a price tag to another walking the same path." The sender was never identified, but the message was clear: Elias had joined a tradition bigger than any single dramatic moment. At the 5th anniversary gala, Seraphina took the stage with confidence that had nothing to do with her father's wealth and everything to do with her own journey. 5 years ago, I died for 3 minutes, she began. her voice carrying strength, born from vulnerability, accepted and transformed. A 12-year-old boy brought me back, not because he was superhuman, but because he'd prepared himself to be useful when the moment came. Today, 17,000 children carry emergency devices inspired by his vision. 43 people with conditions like mine live normally because we understand our triggers. 800 young inventors from overlooked communities are changing their worlds because someone believed genius doesn't care about zip codes. Elias, now 17, and preparing for early admission to medical school, watched from the audience rather than the stage, still uncomfortable with spotlight, but accepting its necessity. His latest project, an artificial intelligence system that could teach emergency response techniques through virtual reality, making quality training accessible globally, had already received preliminary approval from international health organizations. The boy who'd learned from library books was creating systems so others wouldn't have to rely on such scattered resources. William had aged visibly in the 5 years since that night, but it was the aging of someone who'd found purpose beyond profit margins. The foundation had become his true legacy, more meaningful than any corporate achievement. He'd learned something profound from a 12-year-old with a toolbox. That power meant nothing if it couldn't protect what you loved, but properly directed, it could protect what others loved too. On quiet evenings, George and William sometimes found themselves on the Sterling Manor's terrace, two fathers from different worlds brought together by their exceptional children. They rarely spoke during these moments, comfortable in shared silence that said more than words. They'd both learned that raising remarkable children meant accepting you couldn't protect them from their gifts, only support them in using those gifts wisely. The story that began with 3 seconds in a ballroom would continue long after its principles were gone. The foundation's structure ensured that its legal framework as bulletproof as Serena Hale could make it. Its mission protected by the kind of transparency that made corruption impossible. But more than structures and endowments, the story would continue because it had planted an idea that genius wasn't about exceptional individuals, but about preparing ordinary people to do extraordinary things when the moment demanded it.